Okay, we're live.
We're live. This is finally happening, Sangeeta.
This is finally happening. Hello,
Yeah.
everybody. Welcome to my very first LinkedIn Live. I'm happy to be joined here with Khalil Guliwala. We've done a few discussions in the past. It's always lovely to talk to you. Khalil, welcome. Congratulations.
Thank you.
You have a book out now.
Yes, I do. So it's a book available. So I'm based out of Quebec, Canada. So we live in French over here. So I published a book in French with my wife called, in English, should be A Muslim in the Sugar Shack. So the idea is just sort of a bunch of funny essays about my kind of immigration story, kind of looking at Quebec culture to the eyes of an immigrant. And it's been fun. It's been a really fun exercise. Well, what about you, Sangeeta? What have you been up to since we last chatted?
Ah, yeah. So I think we did the brown bodies and boundaries in winter.
Yes.
So that was around November. So it's been a few months, wintering and then essential expansions, I suppose. The work is bigger now. Um, what's lovely is that organically the work is now, I'm doing a workshop for the AAPI Heritage Month. So, there's all of that. There's a lot of interesting conversations. And of course, the work itself, as the seasons go, deepens and it takes on a certain quality. So busy, and busy is good.
Yeah, yeah. I think the point, Sangeeta, as well. Like, each season, so meaning we think of things in years, right? I've got my year ahead of me. It's January. I've got stuff I want to accomplish for the year, and then it becomes in just like mental quarters. As sad as it is, like here's depending on seasonality. Here's my winter. Here's my summer. Here's my spring. Here's my fall, kind of in there. So we're a different time of the year right now, Sangeeta. So how do you think it affects people's bodies? I mean, I'm sure you've got thoughts. Last we talked was in winter. We got summer coming up. What are you seeing in terms of how people are handling the stress of summer, fall, but also all that's going on in the world?
Yeah, yeah. I think if you live in cold countries, there's a lot of hey, spring's here and summer's here, and you know, that's one thing. But also, I think then there's the whole bodies and summer body and spring body, and I think there's also a lot of pressure to kind of scoop up as much of summer as you possibly can, and narratives of what rest should look like,
Hmm.
and even that, I think you've got to book your tickets almost a year in advance. And for those of us that are caregiving, then you get into all the, I'm sure you're familiar with getting the children into
Summer
schools,
camps, yeah.
summer camps and all of that. You give me 1 second, I'm just going to check if we're live on LinkedIn. um, okay. Because I asked a friend of mine to join just to check
Hmm.
it. Um, yeah, I mean, we are. Hold on a second. So, yes, there's 1 minute.
I
Yeah.
I joined it on LinkedIn on my phone. It says the event will start soon. Wait for the host to start. So there's something I
Oh,
think that needs to be connected.
okay. Okay, hold on.
Okay.
Settings, general. Mm, okay. Orders and belonging. I think the only, like, I'm in the studio now.
Mhm.
So I think I will have to edit. Okay. Yes. Oh, of course. Silly me. Oh, this is good. Oops. Okay. Yeah, that's fine. Uh, oh, okay. Did that. Okay. Okay. 1 minute. Okay. Changes. Okay. Yeah, this is why I asked my friend to
Okay.
just help out.
Yeah.
Now,
Exactly. I'm on my phone as well right now. It still says starting soon. So I think soon the
okay.
connection should be made.
Okay. I did. Yeah. We are live now. It says I'm live on YouTube and LinkedIn. Mm, yeah. Oh, public scheduled. Yeah. Stream's already live. Yeah. It should. Okay. How was.
Yeah.
Check. Same thing can't. Okay. Um. We'll figure it out. Worst case. Oh yeah. It's live 5 seconds ago. Yeah.
It's live.
Again. Yeah. Okay. Can you see it?
On my side, no, I'm still seeing sort of on LinkedIn. It says starting soon. It's like a little message popping up. I'll try
Oh,
again.
okay.
Join. It says just starting soon. The event will start soon. Wait for the host to start.
Okay.
Let me see anything else.
Yeah, I'm seeing it on my end.
Zero to 10? Okay. As
Yeah.
long as one of us seeing it, that's the most important thing. Yeah.
But that's, if people can't see it, I don't know. Okay, I guess we just talk and then see what happens.
Yeah. Give me a second. Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, this is going to be recorded.
Hmm.
And so, can
Always edit
put in
stuff
the
later.
I think so. Hold on a second. Let me just ask my friend. Ugh. Okay. It is live, but I don't know why. I mean, I can see it on my LinkedIn.
Okay. I think, and
yeah.
that's perfect. It's probably just some odd reason it's not showing up on my problem just because I'm here as well.
Pre-live. See, no, it's just saying pre-live. Okay, hold on. Join. All good. Okay, she can see it.
You can see
Cool.
it. Amazing.
Yep.
So,
Excellent.
so anybody following along, Sangeeta as amazingly just always with complete calm, just handle all the technical issues with LinkedIn Live. It looks so simple, but really, Sangeeta, you've been so calm handling this. That's amazing.
Part of being an entrepreneur, I guess.
Yeah. So I think what you're talking with Sangeeta was just about sort of like the different seasons that we're kind of going into. When you're talking about summer and how that could affect the body, you're talking about schools and caregivers, and maybe you want to tell me a little
Yeah.
more. Like what are you seeing? Like what are you seeing any kind of new topics coming up over summer? Like I imagine body, given that people have
Yeah.
to be a bit more, less clothed for the heat.
And that's a lot of pressure too, right? To like perform summer.
Yeah.
And I think, again, melanated bodies process light differently. We process summer differently. And although we like it, I don't know. And it's one of those, just as much as we carry stories about scarcity, which could also be a colonial legacy, I think, we also carry stories of abundance when it comes to sunlight, and therefore we probably don't share the sunlight scarcity anxiety as much.
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you think?
Here's the thing, because one of the sort of third culture currents. So I'm a Gujarati background. I was born in Dubai, so summer desert heat, like all year long, desert sunlight. And then I moved to Montreal, which is in Canada, about 20 years ago, and I was like, I don't feel as good as I used to. And this is 20 years ago. So having to understand even what seasonal affective disorder is, SAD by its acronym, understanding how sunlight affects me, getting, sun lamps, getting vitamin pills. Because suddenly, because you just don't realize that in some sense, because you're in your environment, your body is in a new ecosystem, right? And you just don't even realize how much it's affecting you until sometimes it's too late, and you're like, okay, and at the point you're getting medical help.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's true. I think that's one of the first things that happens, when you move. It's lack of sunlight, it's gloomy, it's, yeah. Sorry, go one
No,
second. Let me just make sure I can record this. And then, hold on a sec. Okay. Okay, recording. No. Okay. I
yeah,
don't know how to record it, but that's fine.
yeah.
Okay. So I was talking about
About
now
bodies.
vitamin D. Vitamin.
Yeah.
This is weird because I've been here in Chennai, and this is the last place that you would think one would get like vitamin D deficiency. But I was severely depleted vitamin D because it's not just the sunlight. What because of the oppressive heat, you don't go out as much, right?
Mm.
And then so your body, it's more common than you think, but also it's environment and everything. It's not
Yeah.
just vitamin D. It's also how your body takes in and processes it, and overall levels of inflammation and insulin resistance and all of that stuff. I think they all go hand in hand. But we were talking about summer, and
Mm.
I mean, huge. One of the other things also about summer, which you don't realize when you move from tropical or equatorial countries, is just how long the bloody days are, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, like
It
I
just really messes
mm,
with your brain.
yeah, and it's very segue here, but I'm like, I'm a secular Muslim, and I wear that for like Ramadan, which is a month of fasting. If you're
Yeah.
at the Middle Eastern kind of level, it's happening at the same time every day. But
Mm-hmm.
summertime, it can happen like 8 or 9 p.m. I mean, like these are the things that you people don't realize, but it's affecting not just your day to day, but affecting the way you even show up
Correct.
for your faith and everything else.
Absolutely. Oh my
Yeah.
God. Yeah. So, one of our best friends is practicing Muslim, and when we were in the UK, he'd come and visit us. And when he was there for the summer, we used to feel so. I used to be up until whenever and like make something for him because he'd have to wake up really early to
Mm.
eat and then he's going the whole day fasting. So when he visits us in the summer, like one of us would like kind of be awake and make sure that we cook and
That's very
there's food
nice.
for him, because of the exactly what you said. It's not the 6 to 6,
Yeah.
right? So in India especially, I mean, yeah, I suppose if you're tropical or equatorial, in India, I think the sunset times, it's less than an hour difference between the earliest sunset versus the latest sunset. I think it's somewhere between 5:30 and 6:30. So you don't realize, like, the brain is wired for almost equal, 12 hours of sun and 12 hours of not sun,
Mm. Yeah.
darkness.
Darkness. Yeah.
It's a pretty equal sort of thing. And of course, this is where you get, and there are fruits and trees that are predicated on this ecosystem, like the mango, the jackfruit, the banana,
Mm.
things that grow in temperatures that are largely equal, and the day and nights that are not that different. But yeah, I mean, when you said Ramadan and fasting, I remember this because um, I think winters are a little bit better in Europe, but then the summer fasts tend to
Yeah.
go much
Oh,
longer,
longer.
right? Which, when you're moving, can be really hard because I think it's one thing to break fast at 6 p.m. or 6:30 p.m., but then it's another thing to break fast in like 10, 11 sometimes, right? Like if you're
Yeah.
traveling in Norway, then it gets really hard.
Yeah, the land of the midnight sun. I know it's Japan, but that concept over there. And so, like you're talking, we're talking so much about sort of sunlight, about weather, about seasons. One thing I keep thinking about, we just had Mother's Day just kind of go by, And I'm sure even for like mothers, because I mean, who take on the bulk of the work, I'm sure summer is a different experience having to plan out, like you're mentioning, school, summer school.
Yeah,
What's like, what are you,
yeah.
what are you seeing over there?
Yeah, I think there's sort of a mad rush to get children into summer camps, and then the larger, if you zoom out, right, and I'm not saying I'm out of the grid entirely by any means, right? This idea that we need both parents in the workforce and defining productivity in GDP terms,
Mm,
and because we do that, we also then define productivity in like self-worth is your net worth.
yeah,
And there is also an economic reality of families needing both incomes.
yeah,
Then because of that, our idea of a family has changed tremendously post industrial revolution. I think one of the things that I saw today was a on LinkedIn, and I just commented on it this morning, was a study somewhere in Europe where college students were allowed to stay in elder care facilities for free, like free
okay,
board and rent, in exchange for 30 hours of companionship for the
okay,
elder,
with the people,
for the
with the
older.
people.
Yeah. And then there were all these people saying, oh, the data is amazing, and we should do this in the UK, and we should do that. And, I was like, the word is family.
Mm,
It's not intergenerational family, it is not joint family. The word is family,
yeah,
because family is the institution which contained it all. We
yeah,
this is historically, we are, for the longest time, pre-industrial revolution, every country, every culture was multi-generational in their own way, right? And
yeah, and
pre-industrial.
huge families as well, right? Cousins and
Right.
cousins.
That's right. That's right. And so the act of elderly care was not disparate from young people, right?
Yeah,
So obviously, we need data to say that older people have better health outcomes, uh, lesser rates of depression
mm,
if they are exposed to young people, right? But
yeah,
if you think about this segregation, this seclusion, it's very artificial, isn't it?
yeah,
Humanity was never meant to be segregated into age specific classrooms. It begins there,
yeah,
right? And then to think that there are older people after retirement, because you're defining self-worth and productivity and worth itself in economic terms. Once they retire,
mm,
they become a burden on the
yeah,
economic system. However, it was never meant to be like that,
yeah,
because if you think about a system that prioritizes family as the institution, then some percentage of older people would graduate into this function of elderhood, which means that they were able to be the master co-regulator of the house.
mm,
So you've seen, I don't know, some of us have only seen this in movies, right? Like if I grew up in a joint family,
mm.
so until I was 6 or 8 or something. So,
Beautiful.
but I know that that's not the dominant experience for urban dwellers, even in my age in India, right?
Yeah,
Um, so the reason I say this is going back to the idea of having, and I'm not saying all old people are elders, definitely. Right? I'm not saying that.
some people are
Some
forever
people
young. Some people don't want that
are.
role, right?
No, or don't know how to perform it, and
Yeah,
then end up traumatizing, so upholding things that don't need to be upheld, and passing on trauma, right? So I'm
yeah,
certainly not suggesting, this is not a romanticized view of Eastern cultures by any means, right?
Yeah. Like,
um,
yeah, I think we've all seen it. I think we've all seen enough Amitabh Bachchan movies where he's the angry grandfather,
Oh
who's
God,
just
yeah.
who's just
Oh,
pissed off with
those,
his kids.
oh my God, yeah. K3G and
Yeah.
Parampara, Anushasan, and what's the other one?
See, the list just
So
goes
he
on,
says
right?
three things, right? Like, no,
Yeah.
it's like a meme. He says what? Parampara, something, and Anushasan. Okay.
Yeah. That's it. We still figure it out. But yeah, I think that's it. You're seeing that what you're pointing out is the fact that, what was once a very organic thing has now become so functionalized. It's taken on this business bureaucracy term that didn't exist 40, 50 years ago. And now we're
That's right.
thinking of it as elder care versus just taking care of my parents. We're thinking of it
Yeah.
as like,
Or just
calls to ourselves,
living,
just
or just
living,
living in a
living.
family.
Yeah, just living a family.
So we shouldn't be calling it intergenerational, whatever, household or
Mm.
multi-generational households, because it's somehow like it's a new concept, right? Like until then we should call it family, and
Yeah.
family is exactly that. It is an institution, and you'd see those when nobody gets left behind, and
Mm.
there is, um, within the family system there is equality and equity. What I mean by that is, I mean, outside of the family system, right, you're existing in capitalism, winner takes all, power is
Yeah.
everything, no space for disability or vulnerable, or the young children or elders who might need more, right?
Yeah.
Because it's a very linear, each person for themselves. However, within the family unit, it's not like that,
Yeah.
because the young ones need more and the older ones need more. And you do family in a way where everybody's needs get met. And hopefully, if that institution is at least semi working, the handicapped, the disabled, the
Yeah.
intellectually whatever, right,
Those needs. Yeah.
those in the fringes still belong, because
Yeah.
the institution's primary goal is not productivity and GDP in economic terms, right? The
Yeah.
institution's primary goal is the institution itself.
Yeah, which is, and this is the thing is we're so used to talking about GDP. And I know you're kind of pointing out this fact that it's kind of like fish in water. We're taking for granted these words like GDP, called the icons, all those bureaucratic terms, but that's the water, and that water has actually been changed in the past couple of years. When really a center of it, like you said, is capitalism sees people by the economic output. When they retire, they become unpeople. If they're on maternity leave or paternity leave, they're unpeople. Disabled, they're almost not treated as human beings anymore. The
That's right.
family is the protector, saying, no, you can come as your broken self here, and we will.
Exactly.
But the aim is to love and take care of you. Might always succeed, but it's a place where people can kind of be taken care of.
Yeah. And I think even that has understandably taken a big hit, because we've sort of, there is all of this that is happening on the outside, and then we need those protective layers so that we can, in theory, function as institutions, right? And even if the institution itself is changing, I, like I said, I grew up in a joint family until I was like 6 or 8, but now it's amazing. Like my parents, and their siblings on both sides, they live in a village. They all have like houses next to each other.
That's
Some
nice.
of my cousins live there or are close to there, and then they have grandchildren, so when we go visit, whatever, right? So
Mm.
their I don't think they've ever, and they live in a commune
Mm.
which is spiritual, right? So they have that role of being the elder, right?
Yeah.
And they are active, they're fit, you know which I think is not common in these days.
Mm.
Isolation and loneliness. People, if even my dad's 83 and my mom's like 73, but even in like urban educated India, I think those systems have shifted
Yeah.
to where all of this is now, yes, there are retirement homes, and that's good, to for older people to go into. But then the critical question is exactly what you said. If you're under 18, you're a burden, right?
Yeah.
So I've got to get you a job at 12. I've got to get you a job at the ice cream store when you're 13,
Wow.
right? Because you're a burden. So the sooner
Yeah.
you can be productive in economic terms, that's what I'm going to prioritize. And I'm going to call it independence,
Mm.
right? And so this is where it gets
The branding.
when the branding.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when capitalism meets a version of feminism that where detachment and disconnection. So this is where we are. I mean, this is again a slightly gendered perspective on
Nice.
it. I grew up drinking the Kool-Aid that um, for a woman to move from being an unpeople to people, she must be economically productive, and
Mm.
therefore roles like building institutions that outlast you generationally, that soul work, the sacred
Yeah.
work, the nurturing, just basic motherhood and nurturing, was consistently devalued. I'm ashamed to say this, but I grew up thinking that stay-at-home moms were less than,
Mm.
right? Because that's the Kool-Aid that I was raised on. It was all about academic achievement. It was all about
Economic
playing
productivity.
and productivity. But once you have children, then you're being asked to play a completely different role, with one that requires attunement and safety and nurturing. And if you did not have that protective bubble around you, which it's constantly under assault, right?
Yeah.
Because we have reduced it to a feminism versus attachment question.
Mm.
That's how because we have glorified. I mean, you see all the so motherhood. We've on the one hand, okay, and this is why we are polarized. I think parenting and nurturing and caregiving has never been more polarized than it is today, because on the one hand, there is the trad wives
Mm.
thing that is going
Movement.
on,
Yeah.
right? Movement that is going on. And that's why, right, you have extremes. And then you see this in this space as well, is people completely running away and abandoning. And you're either putting up the super mom in a pedestal, so you're Pinterest worthy, you
Yeah.
bake scratch, you hold party like birthday parties that are Instagram worthy, so you're still performing
Yeah.
the role, right? With I don't think
Performance.
it, whether it's with presence or attunement, we don't know, but there is no scope for messiness,
Yeah.
right there. Or you are a disconnected parent, right, for whom you're physically there but not there,
Yeah.
right? uh,
You have to think
where
about work and stuff. Yeah.
no, but also you glorify hating your kids, right? You glorify
Mm.
thinking of your kids as a. So I don't know if you know you've been on this trend. Like 5-6 years ago, there was this trend, hurrah for gin, and blogs, mommy bloggers like that,
Okay.
who were sort of glorifying. I mean, motherhood is allowed to be hard. I get that. So so again, polarization
Mm.
antidote, right? This extreme is the parent who is this all sacrificing super mom who's perfect. And then it gave rise to this bit where you were glorifying neglectful parenting, hostile parenting, shaming your kids on social media
Wow.
and calling it fun, right? They would put their kids out in a funny way, which what I'm saying is these are two
Extremes almost.
extremes and two presentations of the same problem,
Mm.
which is that caregiving roles are consistently devalued in patriarchy, whoever
Yeah.
does it.
Yeah.
That's why we are very uncomfortable with stay-at-home dads, yet as a culture, right? I mean,
Yeah.
not just Indian. We don't have model. We talked about it the last time. But also the other thing is, and this is something that a lot of, I don't know if you've seen this thing about women are out earning men more now than ever before
Yeah.
in relationships and long-term partnerships. However, um, that is leading to the manosphere, where there is a small percentage of men who have a lot of choices, and a lot of men who are being taken out of the dating pool
Hmm.
because women are still looking for men that are either equal to or earning more than them,
Yeah.
right? Not, yeah. So the provision, the idea of shifting from what the provider
Yeah.
role is to from financial to more like emotional and other ways of protecting, right? Soul protection. I think both men and women are on that journey, and it's all messy and imperfect right now.
Yeah.
Um,
And it sounds
yeah.
like, yeah, there it's those questions we come back to, like, the definition of masculinity and of femininity. And one of the most interesting analysis I came across was talking about, and this is, again, if you think of sort of our cultures, right? Indian culture, there's a respect for the intellectual, the academic, but blue collar physical work isn't glorified. It's very glorified in North America. It's doing physical work is extremely glorified as a hobby, as a job. And this notion where a lot of that, almost the trad wife is the woman, is also the movement of men kind of giving up white collar jobs, become working in garages or shops. But it's also about, again, that the element of looking for masculinity as something that existed in the past and looking at it in terms of what we do versus who we are. And I find that extremely fascinating as well, because it's also like, and if you think of words that's affecting, if you think of a lot of the rhetoric around in the US, the tariffs and stuff, is about what? Bringing blue collar jobs, factory work, manual work back in the US, which is exactly what I think some people are missing, is because for a lot of men, that's what being a man is about. Masculinity
Correct.
is about having that physical job. So these aren't things that are just affecting, let's say, people and families. It's affecting how countries are operating. It's affecting
Oh, this
everybody
is
globally.
brilliant. Yeah, that's a brilliant observation. And I think it's the same thing with the trad wives.
Yeah.
So whether you're a man or a woman, you can't just live in your intellect.
Yeah.
You can't just live in your intellect and outsource the physical aspects to somebody else, right? So because even attachment and love and parenting, a lot of parenting is very custodial, right? In the sense that it's repeated kind of brunt work, and there is a physicality to it, right? So with the trad wives, it's the same thing. Going back to the slow living, and I'll churn butter, that's
Mm.
still physical,
Yeah.
manual labor, because that's what I'm saying, right? So this left brain, I mean, this is simplification, but not really. So the left brain, let's say, is this is my left brain. Yeah, left brain is the intellect,
Mm.
rational, right, and the right brain is where the emotions and all of that lives, right? The thing that is super important is that for these two brains to talk to each other back and forth is very physical, right? So you can't live, we're so disconnected from our bodies that we have to go to movement classes to move,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
And so there is a separate space for it. There is a separate time in the day for it. It is sequestered, it's exclusive. There is a uniform for it, like it's spandex, and there are languages for it, and there is a culture around it, right?
Yeah.
Because it's not integrated during the day. And it's the same thing with caregiving, right? Whether it's
Yeah.
elder care or taking care of the children, um, it's just something you do. However, then it's not the main part of your day, right? So we
Yeah.
have effectively um, uh, incentivized people cutting off from their bodies for 8 to 10 hours a day,
Wow.
and cutting off from their families, and cutting off from connection, and cutting off from movement, and cutting off from soul, you know. But
To
it
be
was, yeah.
No, but to your point, sorry, Coach Gita, but maybe think where I remember I was talking to somebody who was working at a big consultancy firm, and he was talking about how much money he earned. He was just having a conversation. I was like, that's amazing. He's like, no. He's like, so they can own me. So if they
Yeah.
call me and I'm in a party, I'm at a wedding, I'm wherever, I've got to pick up that call and I have to leave. It's like it's not
Yeah.
a favor they give me; they're doing it to own me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah,
Yeah. I was working in consulting, and after my children, really, it's the idea of what kind of rich you want to be,
yeah,
right? And this is a big, big unlearning, right? Because look, we all grew up in, I don't know, me and my husband come from average middle class families, not a lot of like ancestral wealth to fall back on or whatever, right? So you kind of had to get economically productive after, a point of time. It's not like being endlessly supported while you're experimenting theater or whatever, right?
Yeah.
I mean, those were not options. I'm not
Yeah.
saying it's a bad thing, but those were
Yeah.
not options. So you just had to, if you were lucky, you were supported until your master's, maybe potentially PhD, but you had to earn your keep by then.
Yeah.
But it's not being supported until you're 45, right? And
Yeah.
your girlfriend lives at home, and everybody's trying their own thing what in the parental home. It was not like that. But within that, right, I think the unlearning, a big unlearning, is to try and figure out who we are, if not our paycheck, and divesting from the idea of being owned has been a big journey for us. So we are at that point where, um, being choice rich
Mm.
feels super important than being rich in just purely financial net worth terms, because it's that's what again, depending on which country it is, it's almost 2 decades of visa slavery,
Yeah.
in the sense of the US owning you, 15 to 20 years of visa slavery. Everything, right, from who you marry, is I'm going to say this word, but hopefully it's not hurting people. But uh, maybe not. But it's opportunistic in the sense that if I marry someone, like, okay, if you're looking for a partner,
Mm.
and you're looking at dating apps or marriage apps or matchmaking apps or whatever, this all of this gets factored in,
Yeah.
right, in terms of who you marry, and where you live and what you do. And therefore what I'm saying is, the number on a piece of paper might look very big, and but then you also have to question about what is the cost of that.
Yeah.
If you're being owned by, so you're being owned by the country until you get the citizenship, and depending on which country it is, it's anywhere between 5 years and 20 years,
Mm.
right,
Yeah.
where you're essentially being owned by this country and you're subject to all of this, right? So there are people who I know, understandably, right, will not come on a podcast and talk about anything that could get them in trouble,
Mm.
understandably, right? So it's
It's
um
restricting them.
it
It's
is
taking
restricting
away
them.
their voice, right? Where they suddenly
Yeah.
have that. Like one of the things that, like what the idea came to me was, I remember. So again, I because of that Indian citizenship in the Middle East, I didn't have local citizenship. So for us, it was always killer. Like, don't get in trouble with the cops. Like, whatever happens, you do not want to disappear in a Middle Eastern jail or prison.
Mm.
And what fascinated me when I came to North America was, I had friends of people who go for like bar fights like every weekend, and they didn't care about the cops. And I was like, it was such a different way to see the world. For me, it was, you end up in a jail, a penal, or like the system. You're disappeared.
Mhm.
No one knows where you are. But coming back to
Mhm.
essentially what you can express. Well, some of these people were just, they had fun. And I'm
Mhm.
not saying pros or cons. I'm not saying there's one kind of
Yeah,
lifestyle
yeah,
or the
yeah.
other. But I mean, it was such a different way to view themselves and how they could express or what they could use. I can do
Yeah.
what I want. If something happens, I'll deal with it,
Yeah.
right? Because your voice has to
Exactly.
be muted down, right? It's why people
Exactly.
put up with like toxic workplaces, harassment. I mean,
Mhm. 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 Because you fought so hard to get there, so you better shut up.
yeah,
That's the cost, right? Like women in the workplace, women in toxic workplaces, I fought so hard to get you educated. I fought so hard to, you know give you the freedom or whatever to relocate and work and whatever, and therefore, am I going to rock the boat? But there is literally too much at stake, right? Like for many years until you become a citizen, there is literally your survival at stake, and therefore there are limits to authenticity, right? And my thing is, that's okay about, or not, that depends on the payout, right, at the end of it. But I'm also saying that the big mindset shift is around what richness actually is. And I think that is, I think it changes by the decade of life that you're in, probably. But
Yeah.
the I feel like the ultimate flex is to be choice rich,
Yeah.
and then even if you had more choices than the other person, right? Like I want to, mm, I don't know. I don't know. I know people that are 50 plus with like two mortgages and adult children that they still have to sort of
Support,
support
carry.
or whatever. And then you're thinking that gets in the way of like really living life and having choices, like elder care, not being able to travel whenever you want to, let's say, take care of aging parents, or taking care of your health, or going on a spiritual journey, or even traveling the world. And then by the time this is all done, and you pay for your children, and the college fees are astronomical, you pay a ton to get them into Ivy League, and then you're still paying it off. And by the time you're like 60, 65, you don't have any health left to
Yeah.
travel the world. I don't know. That's the sad thing. So, yes,
And I was thinking either, like as you're saying it, it's that again, like anybody's listening, we're kind of projecting our lives. We're like, yeah, yes, yes, yes. But it's almost have capitalism, and I'm still kind of like every trying to make understand it a bit better and my own kind of relationship with it. But it's almost mapped out my life. It's mapped out sort of like, what do I do? Almost literally, here's the time I can make my money, here's the time my health, here's retirement, whatever that looks like down the line, and then time after that. But in a way that that it's less about coming from me and more just in the economic system. It's almost like I think of this that image of like when a python swallows a pig, you just see it kind of make its way to the snake, and that's what's going on right now. We're all might be different background, but going through that. Here's a household, to make that comparison, maybe this is a householder state, but we're not becoming like sannyasis or monks. We're essentially going to retirement where you just become unpeople.
unpeople, exact that. I love that word. I love that word, because there is no elderhood. Because if you're defining everything in productivity terms, there is no eldering, there's no
Yeah.
role for eldering, right? Which is why there is a mistrust of elders and anything old, and all of that, especially if we because we move, like, let's say, to Anglo North America. We leave all the generational stuff behind, and so there is such a mistrust of adults and adulting and wisdom and eldering,
Yeah.
in favor of, I'll just figure it out and I can experiment, right?
Yeah.
It goes back to that settler culture. Not just Indians, just people that immigrate, that came into Anglo North American shores. So I think there's also a cultural, with all the and setting up shop there, and missing the having to elder before your time, but you don't have that yardstick of what
Mm.
an elder is, right? Like, I'm not talking about the annoying patriarchy toting elder. I'm talking about you probably those old houses where
Yeah.
an elder is sort of just sitting, knitting, or doing
Mm.
something with the rice, or something repeated
Yeah.
manually, right?
Manually.
Man
Yeah.
or woman. And then there's all the stuff happening in the house, and chaos and whatever. And then they're just there calmly, and if you approach them, they might tell you like a sentence or so, and it's just so profound, and it really regulates the nervous system, right? I mean, this could be imaginary for most of us, sadly, right? But it's just the idea of being the master co-regulator,
Mm.
and growing into it, which I think we live in an elderless society now. Wherever in the world you are, it doesn't matter, because
Mm.
elders are not elders. They're, because
There.
we've forgotten that, and they're acting like, children, and, you know,
Yeah.
there's some of that. And then we're very, very cut off from it, right? And because we're such a productivity addicted and competence addicted culture, I think it's also very hard for us to reckon with endings.
Yeah.
Just like we've messed with birth, we've also messed with death.
Yeah. We all want to be perpetually young. Like you're talking about have some it's not about I think mindsets. And I don't think we're denigrating people anyway. But there's such thing, you look at somebody, you said, maybe we should accept that we're getting older, and that's not a
Yeah.
bad thing.
Yeah.
Like I was talking to somebody. I remember I just mentioned something about, like, we were talking about like a marketing plan, and some marketing plans are age kind of focus. And I mentioned, oh, on the elderly 160, and he got offended because he was plus 60. And I was like, why am I spending time to calm you down, buddy? Like, you're an age, look at it, accept it. If you're getting triggered
Hmm.
by it, something more to it. But I realized it's a society that essentially made him feel bad for being something that literally it's a natural.
Unpeople.
Yeah, for
Yeah,
the age
for
of it.
becoming an unpeople. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm 40 plus and I feel ancient, which is not a bad thing, like,
Yeah.
but I'm saying we are extremely death phobic as a
Yeah.
culture, and so we are selling people this idea. So that's the thing, right? So if you're an older person,
Hmm.
what you do not bring in terms of economic productivity, you must make up by being the ideal consumer.
Yeah.
Therefore we have older products, right? So you're
Yeah.
either way you're contributing to because you're consuming,
Yeah.
in economic terms. And so, so there are people with like these two or three mortgages and houses that they've paid off, who are going to sell it in order to go into care homes or
Yeah.
semi-retirement homes or whatever. Because again, one of the tenets of capitalism is you have to be producing
Hmm.
or you have to be consuming, therefore the economy grows, right? And therefore,
Yeah.
I
No,
don't
I
know.
and this is, see, this is one of the things that I'm, like you almost trying to figure out, kind of like, how do we make sure that we, like, and this is where it's interesting, almost going upstream rather than just take it for granted. What can we do to keep at least our family kind of around us? So, like, I'm based out of the Greater Montreal area with my wife. We got her parents in Quebec City. We got my mom's sister in Toronto. And so part of it's having that, as much as possible, having those FaceTimes and virtual calls. Like, we all know it's at least better than like having that involvement over there, having photographs, having, giving them these like photographs with a link to our Amazon account. So every time we take a photo, they see updated photos of family, seeing each other. And what I was thinking is, you've obviously worked through this. You've talked about this. What can people do who kind of say, okay, you know what, there's a lot going on, but at least they don't need to maybe solve the problem of capitalism and how it views people, but how can they kind of at least start bringing more of their family into their daily lives?
Yeah. Oh, that's a beautiful question. I think, we've talked about this in the context of couples, but I think we can talk about it in the context of family as well, right? You know, that it's like a zob of oxytocin within the family. This is a little bit of a stretch, but just for us to wrap our heads around it, is like, yeah, the rest of the world, when you step outside the house, it can be, capitalism, but when you step in, it's institution, it's socialism or communism, whatever you want to call it, right? Where it's not winner takes all. It's
Mm,
about whoever has the need will be supported like that. I think one of the big lens changes that we can consciously do, and this is my work, right? So this is the work that I do with clients. When we talk about therapy and coaching, if you're still working with that lens, there's no personal growth, because then what you're doing is you're putting personal growth through the capitalistic lens where more is more and growth for growth's sake, and it becomes this navel gazing. And
mm,
I want to run away from discomfort, and I want to run away from pain and aging and all of that. And it's very, very sad that we're coming to the point where I heard this, somebody was saying the other day that the threshold for somebody to move to elder care or whatever hospice. And I know Canada, I don't know why we're talking about death today, but okay. Some states in Canada have legalized euthanasia, they call
yeah.
it by another name, right? And you know what the threshold is for somebody deciding to do that is if they have to use the bathroom with somebody in there. And I'm thinking, what are we doing as a culture, and this
Mm,
and I think the antidote, and this is my work, when we work together, is really having a language to understand that we humans have limits,
mm,
right? And frailties and vulnerabilities and endings.
Yeah.
If we don't have that perspective, that zob that I talked about, this oxytocin bubble, this family bubble, has to have a different, I'm going to say religion, but I don't mean it in the sense of God, right? But
Mm.
I'm talking about
Well,
the family having a set of a culture that is not one where we are, capitalism as religion or therapy as religion or endless personal growth as religion or whatever, right? All of these altered secular religions that we have today, right? The
mm.
cult.
Yeah.
A lot more secular religions today, more religions than ever before. Yeah, and
Yeah.
we,
Like those
talk,
value systems. Yeah.
yeah, this religion of endless growth, and this religion of perpetual youth, and this religion where man is invincible.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, it makes me think of, and this is, it's such a personal story, but because I grew up in Dubai with 90% of expatriates, it meant I didn't really see anybody who was old. I used the word old elderly in a very, because no one
Yes.
was sick, no one was old. If they were there, they would, because they were maybe family members of a local Emiratis, but very small people, and it goes, all there. And I remember coming to Montreal, Canada, the first time, being like, I am seeing a lot of old people, like with walkers and stuff, and it was shocking. And I think what you're talking about is that, we are talking to be around people, not just because they're a label, but because they're our neighbor who's growing older, our uncle or aunt is growing older, our parents are growing older, or seeing new birth. It's about connecting us to that human story. Like, we're no longer seeing it as an it. We're no longer seeing it as that. We're seeing that as us. I think what you're saying, Sangeeta, is we've got to find ways where we're no longer just leading by the label, but leading by, hey, let's have those relationships around us. And
Yeah.
naturally the label will come after that.
Correct, and then the whatever lessons will come out of it. This resonates with me very deeply because this is one of the things I was just talking to my cousin about this a week ago, maybe a month ago. But I went to college in where I stayed in a hostel, and everybody was your age, plus or minus 4 years, right?
Yeah.
And then one of the years in from one of my hostel rooms, I could see back into the staff quarters, and then you see this old granddad with a little grandchild. And there was this one evening where I was just looking at that, and I had tears in my eyes because it was so, you don't see it, everybody is young,
Mm.
everything is eternal, and for me, one of the big huge gains for me from repatriating to India. See, yes, there is a lot of pain and discomfort. However, for me, the biggest blessing of relocating has been exactly this. So when I was in the UK or the US, you are surrounded by people your age. You're not really very close to birth or death until you have your own birth, right? And
Yeah.
maybe this group of people around you, but you rarely ever see frailty and limits and all of that, like, because that is happening to your parents who may visit you for 6 months and
Mm.
then go back, etc. And then when you come to India to visit them, they want to perform happiness for you, right?
Yeah.
So it's almost like a time warp, right? So, and I'm facing this now when, around aging and of older parents, and I'm seeing the difference in, siblings that are physically closer versus, siblings that maybe visit once or twice a year, or once in 2 years, once in whatever, right? Because I think it's not the same when you visit them infrequently, because it's 10 days and they treat you like a child and they pamper you, and you don't really see the sickness,
Yeah.
you don't really see them deal with their frailties, right? And so I think one of the, and that changes you, oh man, that changes you, right? And
Yeah.
I think that has significantly added nuance and complexity to my work. Yeah, as a counselor, therapist, coach, it has the quality of what I how I work and how we work with clients, I think is significantly enriched, based on that.
Yeah. Sigita, like what I'm, tr- I think what I love to kind of ask you and pick your brain on is, there are people, and this is not, I think it's everybody who's asking themselves, what kind of work do I need to do now so that I have the kind of family that's going to take care of me. Even if they can't
Yeah,
explicitly say it, it's in the background.
yeah,
What kind of maybe questions or reflections they have right now to at least help them work
yeah,
through that process?
yeah,
Is that something you've encountered?
yeah, yeah. That's a very good question. Hmm. Because here's the thing, right? And I sort of, again, I feel like the place to do it would be the family,
Mm,
because as soon as the children go outside, they're being told they're invincible, they're being told they can do anything they want, go anywhere they want, do be, all of those things, right? The the phobia around limits and frailties and endings and
yeah,
vulnerabilities, right? And they're constantly being bombarded with these messages, when on the outside. However, family still continues to be the grail on
yeah,
which, this is, being practiced, right? So I think, staying with discomfort, I feel like, is important. And I'm going to say, I mean, maybe I'm a little morbid when I say this, but I feel like, having conversations about endings,
yeah,
you know, age appropriately, of course, right? I mean,
yeah.
you don't want to
Your
traumatize your
kids,
kid,
but everyone understands.
but
Yeah.
and one of the things that I've been doing personally is to do the oral storytelling,
Oh,
which
beautiful.
so when my mother, one of the things that I'm doing now is, just oral, just a normal phone, and asking older or elder people to talk about their childhood and
Mm,
stories and memories. Oh, so rich, like, so when my mother-in-law comes and she talks about growing up in, she grew up, around a temple. There
mm,
are things called agraharams, like people that are associated with the temple live
mm,
right outside it, right? So the entire story it kind of revolves around the culture and the traditions and the, it is so much. It's not religious, right? It's just a time in history which you
yeah.
can't,
Okay.
you don't have those words anymore, you don't have
Yeah.
those things anymore, even that, getting them involved in like an oral project where they just try and collect stories from their grandparents, of when they were young.
Yeah. And it connects them. It shows them not just that of their own history and culture, but also if you think of intergenerational trauma, think about intergenerational values, mindsets, right? It helps them unpack stuff across the
Yeah.
generations.
Yeah, yeah, and location. I think land is a big part of it, and it's we're so far away from lands,
Mm,
ancestral, like dirt and the land and the continuity that the ancestral home brings.
mm,
Many of us don't have that, connection back to the land. I mean, if you're religious, you may have connection with the place, right?
mm.
Some places, or again, if you have, I guess, in the other set of grandparents are from there, and so they have that, connection to the land historically.
Mm.
But I'm wondering if there is almost a space for that, visiting ancestral, even if you don't own land or whatever,
Yeah.
make trips to, places, and we're so far away from it, right? Like, honestly, so, most of us, from agrarian to semi-urban, then
Mm,
semi-urban to urban, urban to away from India, and
mm.
then away from India to some other place. It's very common for us to have these complicated histories. And then, I'm wondering if, like, dirt, just the land itself
Yeah.
has a significance. And that's part of, again, the work as well. Is it's not like go buy a land in your ancestral hometown.
Yeah.
It's not that.
Yeah,
But
it's a connection to the
what can
land.
we? It's a connection. It's a
Yeah.
physical connection.
Yeah. For me, it's one of those images that was stuck with me was when there was the Normand invasions. This is in France, and the Normans attacking England to take it over. And William the Conqueror, who only spoke French, steps off the ship, gets on the beach, takes a fistful of sand and soil, and swallows it. And he says,
Dirt.
"This, yeah, dirt. It's like I am now off this earth." Now it's a very intense image. It sounds like someone might have bullied him to do it, but that image of him saying there's something about this soil, this earth, this
The
that it
dirt.
I need to
That's where
incorporate
the
within
tree
me.
grows.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. People have, they bring just, a bottle of soil from
Yeah.
their lands. And, it's again, it doesn't have to be religious in the current sense of the word, but, a bit of something physical
Yeah.
that ties them. And that's what, cultures and food and languages. But I think it goes beyond that, right? Like, it's something that, because I think we're all ultimately seeking something, what do you call it, that transcends time, that
Yeah.
transcends generations, and generally land or places of work, culture, right? It's a very they have this concept of kuladevam, like your family deity,
Okay.
usually like a village, like it's a thing in South India. So you can have gods and that and this, but you will have, each family will have a kuladevam, which is like your family deity, right? So a
Okay.
lot of times the deity itself would be not your mainstream Hindu deities, right? They'll be
Yeah.
like Kaval Devams. They are protectors of the boundaries of the village.
It's
There
amazing.
you go.
Okay.
We finally talked about borders. So the
Yeah.
guy, the so the deity is in the border of the village,
Okay.
guarding the village, right? So he's usually on a horse. He has a sword in his hand, and people take cigars and toddy to placate him. And he's supposed to like look out for the village. This predates Hinduism, right? This is more
uh
the animist, nature worshipping
Ancient.
Hinduism
Yeah.
as we know it, right?
Yeah.
So it's not it. Many castes can have the same family deity because
Wow.
it's land based rather than caste or
Yeah.
anything else based. Yeah.
It must be so beautiful because it must be something that unites different people, because again, that sense of locality, a sense of, again, borders, like this is where we are,
And
this
I'm
and this.
here
Yeah.
protecting you. It's
Yeah.
so beautiful. If you take, like, if you're just driving by and you see that, you're like, okay, this is the edge of the village
Yeah.
that needed protection. So this is like, this is my land and I'll protect, sort of thing.
Amazing.
And yeah, like I said, it predates notions of purity and sin. And because it's very common to offer like animal sacrifice, toddies, cigars, all kinds of, you'll see all kinds of like not weird but unique
Offerings.
traditions that you may not find in like the mainstream Hinduism.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But you have to tell me about your book. I know we've
Uh,
talked about many things, but you want to talk
yeah.
a little bit about your book. Where can people buy it? What's it? It's in French, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah. And so
So, I
essentially,
mean, tell
yeah.
me about learning French. Like, were you always like, how did that happen?
So when I it's actually it's one of the things where, so my mother immigrated to Canada, so I immigrated to kind of just to do my to move to Canada. I was doing my studies in Montreal, which is French speaking, and then I met my wife. Not my wife, she's my girlfriend. And when I met her, I decided to actually not kind of leave to go to somewhere else in Canada, but to stay in Montreal. So I went and I studied French as part of the immigration department in Quebec has French language programs. It's free on top of it to give you stipends. It's an amazing, really an investment the government made into its immigrants. I took that program. And it was like a 9-month program, and I started with barely being able to read menus, all the way to the end. Being able to like negotiate, being able to read contracts. Really business, as in the culture and history behind it. And the book was something my wife and I just kind of thought about for years, something that was just fun, sort of, what this kind of questions you get asked as an immigrant, things about dishes, things about, what do you think about this season or whatever. And it was a fun project for me and my wife.
That's amazing. And you guys were picked up by the radio stations and all of that. And
Yeah,
it's been quite
greatly.
a publicity thing. Do you have more coming?
Yeah, we've been working on a second volume, so we're not sure when we might launch it. Maybe within next year or so. Because interestingly, even essays came up as the book kind of came out. So we're definitely working on a volume two. My side as well, working on maybe potentially doing a web series. I know I've tried some stand up as well, so I want to
Oh,
try more
love it.
of it. Um,
Yeah. You know
yeah,
what I really liked about that it had the word Muslim in its title itself. Like,
yeah.
and how was that like in terms of what it, what the reception was like? Because that's
Uh,
quite an important thing, but also, yeah, tell us about that.
Yeah, no, I think it was received very well. I think one of the things was the book itself is a bunch of like funny essays. Each essay is like on a topic. So I'll give you an example was, have like I became like the unofficial spokesperson for butter chicken. And the reason why is because anywhere I go, when I tell them I'm Indian, the first thing they start talking about is butter chicken, right? At a certain point, whenever I go to potlucks, I would just say, "Hey, we should make butter chicken," just to get. And so for me, the essays were just something that was sort of like, it was almost just taking the humor, or at least I found a way to deal with the stuff with humor.
Yeah.
And so even the book is about for me, it was important because I don't see it as kind of, I'm not to me, the book had to represent how I see life over here. And I love it over here. Like I want to be here more than anywhere else in the world. And so for me, it was taking that love and humor. So I think that was also seen by people who saw it was I don't want to be the person and that's standing the pedestal pointing out to people. And like, that's not me. I don't think that's right. I'm either mostly laughing at myself or laughing at all of us. And I think
Oh,
that
that's
was and that was and
beautiful.
that was a tense and it was a tone that
That
really
is
came up with
so,
me.
and I think that's the best way to. It's a slice of life,
Yeah.
right? That's kind of. I don't read French, but that's the vibe that I got from all the
Yeah.
posts that I saw. But
Yeah.
that's a really good way to. I think what do they say in stand up? You don't punch up, you don't punch down, whatever
Is
they say, right? So it's
it,
not like a
yeah.
punching anywhere. It's a slice of life, and I think that's the. You can say some very nuanced, complex things when you just are authentic and
Yeah.
do a slice of life type
Yeah. Just
share. Yeah,
relax. Yeah. Sorry.
yeah. Beautiful. Well, thank you so very much. Anything else, or can we wrap up?
Oh, listen, wrap this thing, Geeta, but this is where I think the work you're doing of talking about again, look at what we've covered so far. We talked about bodies, we talked about bodies, borders,
Borders.
but also gender. We talked about the family. We talked about economics. We talked about aging. You have this way to really kind of through your work take these different threads and you kind of combine them around the body because that's the one thing we all experience, right? Our body and our mind. And wrapping up all the different things that we experience in our daily life into our body, which is also we treat it as a source of stress and anxiety. It's a source of healing. And I think
Yes,
that's why
it's
the work you do
home.
is so important. It's home, right? And that's
It's
that first.
home.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, as always, it's a pleasure to talk to you. I think the conversations just flow. I love that. I do very well with unstructured conversations, and where you can just be yourself. So, really enjoyed it. Thank you so much, and looking forward to the next book. Is there a translation? Will there be a translation available?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna work on translation, maybe have it out with next year or so. So I might do that in between so the second volume coming out.
Nice, nice. So let us know.
Yeah. Thank you so
All
much,
right.
Sangeeta.
Thank you so much. I'll talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye.